Splitgate's final major update went live on September 16th. A sad moment for active players of Splitgate, but as we saw with their announcement only weeks ago, there is a reason to still be excited. Splitgate's not being shut down or cancelled, but rather 1047 is shifting resources to work on their next project, another portal-based shooter in the Splitgate universe utilizing Unreal Engine 5. However, while the future of 1047 seems bright, I think it's also important to take a look back at the history of Splitgate because this game ascended from a school project all the way up to 1047 receiving $10 million in funding due to the success that Splitgate was having. The idea for the game started all the way back in 2014. Co-founder Ian Prolux, aka Cardinal Soldier, had the idea for the game after playing Portal 2. There he had the idea to combine Portals with that of a more traditional FPS shooter like a Halo or a Battlefield or a Call of Duty. At this point prior to this though, Ian had no formal game development experience. However, he was studying computer science at Stanford at the time. Ian took this idea and used it as the basis for his senior project. However, at the time, this was purely just Ian's way of learning some Unreal Engine and getting some game development experience. It really wasn't intended to become the game that we have come to know. The weekend before Ian had to show up at the project fair, he had a group of friends come over and test and make sure that the game functioned, as up to this point it had been purely him just testing it on two different laptops. For Ian, this was really that aha moment when he realized maybe this should be a real thing, as his friends were really enjoying the game. After that though, it did take a back seat due to an internship that he had lined up with Apple at the time. It was when Ian came back to Stanford for his master's degree and reflecting on what his plans were after school that he began to realize, hey, maybe it's time to revisit that fun shooter with Portals. This was when 1047 Studios was founded by both Ian and his co-founder and friend Nick Bagamine. Funnily enough, the studio was even named after the address on their dorm the previous year. This wasn't an easy task though, as Ian had to convince his friend and his family that hey, maybe that job offer that you have lined up from a major company isn't worth it, and instead you should come and do this with me, and as we know, he did decide to do just that. At this point, development on the game was in full force between the two friends, while they were still at school spending almost 60 hours a week working on the game, while also having their schoolwork they had to do too. Between school and this game, it was basically their lives. After they graduated, Ian and Nick took a week off to reset, relax, and then the grind kicked into overdrive. For the first 6 months, Ian and Nick were the only employees of 1047 Games before they went on to hire a level designer and an animator, which they actually funded out of their own pockets completely. After about a year, 1047 was able to get some seed funding, which is when they were able to go out and hire some more seasoned developers, which brought the team up to about 25 employees. This brings us to the initial launch of Splitgate, at the time still named Splitgate Arena Warfare. The game released on Steam on May 24th of 2019 to a moderate amount of buzz, almost purely by word of mouth. Similar to other interesting free-to-play shooters that pop up on Steam from time to time, Splitgate was able to attract a decent amount of attention from content creators looking for a game to cover, which then translated into a good amount of players checking out the game. This ended up topping out at about 11,000 concurrent players, which for a game with basically no marketing isn't too bad. Reception for the game wasn't too bad either at the time, as lots of reviewers seemed to enjoy the game despite some of its more obvious flaws. However, it was clear that some of these issues were going to hurt the player base, like the somewhat poor optimization at the time. On launch, the game basically had 3 ways to play: ranked, social, and customs, which gave it a decent amount of variety, although as Ian has admitted in later interviews, their use of the 1 to 50 rank system like Halo 2 ended up actually being pretty detrimental to the ranked population in the game, and it's something they ended up switching later on. Looking back on the original release of Splitgate is a crazy time. Not only does it look completely different aesthetically in the game, pretty much all of the menus and the UI have also been completely revamped. Unfortunately, at this time though, so, unlike later, where Splitgate adopted the more standard item shop and battle pass model, upon release it was using a loot box model very similar to what you would have seen from Overwatch back around its launch. In 2019 this wasn't totally crazy quite yet, but looking back, the use of this loot box model is heavily dated. At this time, while the game mostly played the same other than some sandbox changes, the level of play was totally different. While these days you'll see top players doing absolutely crazy plays with the portals and the different mechanics, back at that point during the game, they seemed to be used much more sparingly, which led to a totally different style of play. Despite all that though, like I said, the game was fun. But it was also frequently just called Halo with portals, which while I do think helped get people into the door and also probably helped that initial kind of buzz, I think it also pushed a lot of people away once they realized, well, this isn't Halo. It is also important to note that Splitgate originally dropped before the Master Chief Collection came to PC, so that itch for having a Halo style game on PC was still in full swing. Other than some bug fixes, optimization, and little balance updates, this was mostly the game for quite some time. Although on June 6th of the same year, there was a patch where 1047 took social out of the game altogether, leaving just ranked and custom game. This one still baffles me to this day, and I remember at the time, there was a lot of outrage towards this decision, and eventually, social games were added back in. As you can see here, the game dropped off pretty quickly, and by June had fallen into the mere triple digits. While for many live service games this would almost mean the death, Splitgate still had a very bright future, and 1047 was not ready to give up. On September 4th of 2019, 1047 finally dropped the first big update for the game, which was Season 1. This season included a ton of cool things, like a redesigned rank system that's in the game today, which is focused around elo and having different divisions, new daily and weekly challenges, the ability to earn XP in custom games, new cosmetics and other customizations, the new map Abyss, along with touch-ups for other maps, performance upgrades for the game, the addition of the new game mode Race, which allowed players to race across maps, new weapon the BFB, bug fixes, balance updates, and overhauled UI, and they also removed the assault rifle from ranked. Looking back, while comments about the season were pretty positive, it really didn't do a whole lot to revive the game. Technically, it was a 90% increase in players from the month before, but the player base by this point had dropped so low, this meant the peak player count was a mere 487 players for the month of September. Again, outside of small patches, this was going to be the Splitgate that players had to strap into for quite some time. At this point, many wrote Splitgate off as a flash-in-the-pan indie game that had already had its time in the sun, but 1047 was still committed to the game. At the time, they expressed their disappointment that Season 1 did not attract many players back, but they committed to continued support and threw out a target release for console, which was Q1 of 2020, a date that they would miss by quite some time, but you could tell that the passion was still there from 1047, despite not really getting the best results. June 15th of the following year, finally came Season 2. At this point, the player base had been down in the 200s for some months, and the players that were still playing were not only clamoring for new content in a new season, but also that console release of Splitgate. Unfortunately, Season 2 was not going to bring the console release, but it did bring a decent amount of new content for the players that were still there. We got the new map Oasis, the new weapon Carbine, which was basically the old pistol kind of reworked into a carbine. They then took the old pistol and reworked it into more of a sidearm that did less damage and shot a lot faster. They also removed loot boxes from the game altogether and had a new arena pass. They added in a kill cam. They had slight balance updates to the rest of the sandbox, performance optimization, revamped the main menu design and experience, and had other UI changes, and then like all the other patches, had various bug fixes and other improvements. Again, similar to Season 1, reception was pretty positive to the season by all the players that were playing. But like I mentioned earlier, many players were still left really wanting that console release in hopes that it would bring Splitgate to a bigger community. Season 2 over the next few months would bring a slight bump in numbers, but nothing significant as it was still sitting in that 200 player range. At this point, it was pretty obvious that Splitgate was struggling to regain its player base, and this was very detrimental to the player experience. Many social games were filled with mostly bots, or you had bots and just a few players, and trying to play ranked involved a lot of waiting. The core Splitgate fanbase, while small, still absolutely loved the game and pushed on, waiting for the next drop of content and hoping for that bigger marketing push to come along with the console release that had been teased for quite some time. Season 3 came a lot faster than Season 2 did, dropping in October of the same year, but unfortunately, it was still without the console release. Regardless though, this season was still packed with a lot of goodies for the player base to enjoy. The main things here included 6 new maps, one of which was Lava Well, which was a regular map, and then there was the 5 simulation maps, which are a totally different style of map, meant for the takedown game mode, although they were also used for things like 2v2. We also got the new takedown game mode, the practice range, a new arena pass, and various bug fixes. Again, similar to the previous season, reception by the core player base was pretty positive, and the fans sticking around mostly just wanted to see Splitgate succeed again. While Season 3 didn't completely revive the game or anything, you can see between October and March of the following year, the game was slowly starting to pick up players. A lot of this due to the improvements that had been made by 1047 to make Splitgate a more fun and enjoyable game. At this point though, players did wonder, what will happen when the console port finally comes? And well, I think it's time that we talked about it. On June 1st of 2021, 1047 dropped a teaser trailer. It was only 25 seconds long, and it had an ominous title just named Splitgate Teaser Trailer Summer 2021. But this really got the speculation flowing. Could this finally be the console release? Well, Splitgate wouldn't make us wait too long, dropping a new trailer on June 12th titled Splitgate 2021 Announced Trailer. Here they stated that Splitgate was going to release on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC with cross-play on July 27th, 2021. This also included the formal name change from Splitgate Arena Warfare to just Splitgate with their fancy new branding and logo. This exciting news alone would bump the player base up 133% on Steam, almost pushing the peak concurrent player base for the month to 1,000 players. July would also get off to a good start as 1047 announced the pre-beta demo from July 1st to July 6th and then the open beta on July 13th. This is when the wheels really began to start turning, as we saw not only console players coming to check out the game, but also PC players either returning to the game or checking it out for the first time. Here they were able to not only see all the improvements, but they also had the opportunity to find matches easier than before and play crossplay if they had friends on console. This though was not all good news, as the servers for Splitgate basically began to catch on fire, and players had a lot of issues logging into the game or sometimes even being able to play at all. A game that had previously had maybe 1,000 players at best went to 65,000 players within a week, and this wasn't something that was easy to fix. 1047 was extremely forthcoming at the time and said this on a Reddit post on July 22nd. Hey guys, we are really sorry about the repeated server issues. I know how frustrating it is. Trust me, we are frustrated too. We're doing everything we can to stay on top of things, and the 4 of us are sleeping about 2 to 3 hours per night. Right now it is literally a race against time as we try to put out updates with less testing than we would like, as we struggle to keep up with the increase in players. Full transparency, we just hit 65,000 concurrent players, which we are really proud of, but going from 50k to 65k in 24 hours is not an easy task, and going from 1k to 65k in a week is barely humanly possible. We wish we could just throw money at the problem and buy more servers, but there are a lot of moving parts and scaling is an incredibly complicated issue that takes time. At this point though, it was clear. Splitgate had recaptured the minds of the masses, and tons tons of players on both console and PC wanted to hop in and play. And at this time, reception toward the server issues was mostly understanding, though there were obviously the people here and there that were upset. The beta would absolutely pop off even despite these server issues, and Splitgate ended up becoming one of the most played games on Steam in the month of August, and also one of the most downloaded games on PlayStation. The game was truly going viral, and people were having a great time in what seemed like a breath of fresh air in the Battle Royale dominated first-person shooter space. Because of this and the issues that we just talked about a little bit above, 1047 announced that they would be keeping the game in open beta for the foreseeable future, with the beta battle pass ending August 24th. GameSpot even mentioned that since the open beta in July, Splitgate had over 10 million downloads. Unfortunately though, at this point, the full release for the game had been indefinitely delayed, though there was a teaser that more news would be coming at Gamescom on August 25th. It was odd because at this point Splitgate was basically suffering from its own success, but I'm sure this is a problem they would have much rather had than having no player base at all. I also want to note that while I didn't mention it specifically, at this time 1047 did add 3 new maps to the game. Impact, which was added during the open beta originally, and then Crag and Foreground Destruction, which were added to the game once these servers came back online. This takes us to Beta Season 0 on August 25th. While this wasn't the full release that was once planned, it was still a notable amount of content to keep the game moving forward and all the new players pretty happy. The first thing we got here was Carmine Station, which was a complete reimagining of one of the older maps in the game Outpost that had been taken out of the game. We got a new battle pass, we got the new game mode Contamination, which is basically Infection from Halo. There was various playlist updates, they added in a final kill cam, they updated the pistol again, making it fully auto, and then we got various other quality of life updates and bug fixes. While this wasn't a huge update per se, it was still nice to get a new season with some new content and cosmetics to grind for. And although the numbers were starting to drop a bit on Steam, the game was still in a very healthy spot. Moving forward a tiny bit, on September 14th, news came out that 1047 Games was able to raise $10 million in funding and now had a valuation of $1.5 billion after Splitgate was able to amass 13 million downloads. This was after their previous 10 million in July and 6.5 million in May. This new round of funding was led by Lightspeed Venture Partners, and this quote comes from them. In gaming, Lightspeed looks for founders that have a bold vision for innovation and the determination to build the next generation platform. We found that with Ian and Nick. They've done so much with minimal funding, and we're excited to see what they will do with more firepower. We're proud to support them as they take their company to the next level. Here, Ian also spoke about what this meant for the company, and he said, "It's not about throwing money at Splitgate tomorrow. It's more about hiring the right people for the long term and building the business so we can take it to the next level." So it was clear at this point, Splitgate had not only changed the lives of the players it had touched, but also the founders and everyone that had put their faith in Splitgate. 1047 was no longer just a tiny company running off of Ian and Nick's personal funds, but rather a full-fledged development studio with a ton of backing behind it. It's also important to note that this round of funding kept 1047 completely independent rather than going a maybe more traditional route and being bought up by a larger publisher. Later in September, while it wasn't a huge patch, on the 28th we did get the addition of mantling to the game, which was something that people had been talking about for quite some time. We did also get a winter update, which revamped some maps to look a little more wintry, and had the winter event, which had a featured playlist and some challenges come with it. Unfortunately, the next major drop of content for Splitgate wouldn't be until January 27th of the following year, 2022, with Beta Season 1. But this season did bring some pretty cool content. Here we got the beta for the new map creator, which allowed users to create their own Splitgate maps, new game modes like One Flag, CTF, and Evolution, which Evolution was basically a variation of our previous game mode called Showdown, new race difficulties, complete visual overhaul of Foregone Destruction, and adjustments to level layout, new simulation map Hotel, another new battle pass, and then various quality of life updates. We then move a little bit closer to where we are today. In May, 1047 announced the SPS 2022 summer season. Here the announcement came that over $500,000 was going to be up for grabs during 2022. Not only that, major esport organizations would also be entering the game. T1, Space Station Gaming, E United, XSET, Luminosity Gaming, Moist, Elevate, and Kansas City Pioneers were all going to be picking up teams for the new season of the league. All of these orgs would also end up getting in-game skins, which look pretty cool. To add on to the esports hype here, 1047 also announced later in May on the 16th that Beta Season 2 would be releasing on June 2nd. Beta Season 2 would include a lot of cool things like the new matchmaker to try and match you with less bots and more people, another new battle pass, the remaster for the map Abyss, which looked absolutely beautiful, new progression and leveling system, 3 new game modes, Juggernaut, Hot Zone, and Lockdown, quality of life and balance updates, UI changes again, and then updates for the map creator and the new canvas for that map creator, Wet Ocean. They also made it a lot easier to share maps, as you now had the ability to share them using the map code, whereas before you literally had to join someone's game and save the map. So this was a pretty big deal for the custom game and user created content community. Season 2 was a pretty nice season for existing players, but it didn't come without some drama. To hype up Season 2, 1047 did some influencer marketing heavily targeted around Halo-centric YouTubers. While I think this makes sense to do because of the obvious similarities and possible crossover between the two fan bases, many saw this as 1047 taking shots at 343 Industries and Halo Infinite due to the obvious struggles that game was having. This was only exacerbated by many of the YouTubers that were paid for this advertisement to choose titles that were somewhat charged and clickbaity. In isolation, this really would have been a non-story, but the bombardment of these videos all on the same day did leave a sour taste in the mouth of some Halo fans. I should also be straightforward, I did do one of these videos, and I will link that below if you care to check it out. Season 2 was also not flawless in terms of performance. While many games are hardly perfect, Splitgate was really starting to show some of the cracks, especially on the console front. Many users complained of bad frame rates on console and even extending to PCs if you didn't have a top-end PC. There was also a terrible issue with consoles where they would just crash trying to load into games that made playing ranked nearly impossible at one point. While these issues would somewhat be fixed over time, this was one of the first times that I really started to notice the possible tech debt within Splitgate. As you have to remember, this game originally began as a school project many years ago. Later that season, Splitgate did do a cool featured playlist with the No Portals mode, which was a playlist all based around not having portals, sorta similar to the No Build in Fortnite. This is also pretty cool because it was the first time that user created maps were used in matchmaking, and this is actually continued in all of their featured playlists. We are now, I don't even know how many minutes into this video, and we've basically gone over the entire history of Splitgate, and man was it a long one, but also pretty interesting. We are basically caught up to where we are today, and if you've been actively following Splitgate, you know what that means. On September 2nd, 1047 dropped an absolute bombshell on the community. Splitgate would be ceasing feature development, and 1047 would instead be focusing its efforts on a future unannounced project, with the only real info being that it would be a shooter with portals. It is important to note that this isn't the end of Splitgate, and there is still the final season we are going to talk about, but this marks the end of any major development and updates to the game. There are many reasons for this, but a lot of it comes down to what we talked about earlier. While 1047 has grown into a near AAA quality studio over the years, Splitgate itself was a two-person project for a long time. Starting from the ground up will allow them to provide their full vision for a game rather than trying to constantly rework Splitgate while having to add in new content to keep the player base happy. This was pretty apparent in the game for a long time, as Splitgate wasn't really getting new maps in the most recent seasons, but rather focusing on remastering old maps and along with visually upgrading the game and the art style and the constant UI changes. The skins alone in Splitgate have improved leaps and bounds if you look at them today versus when the game originally launched. To me, it was very clear 1047 was trying to bring Splitgate up to the quality that they wanted it to have, but that's also really hard when you're expected to constantly ship out new content and also deal with a laundry list of issues that pop up during the ongoing development of a game. It's also important to note that while the game was not by any means dead, the player base on Steam had fallen into the lower 4-digit. While a full launch of the game could have brought it back to the mainstream for a third time, especially if it was accompanied by a full marketing push, it's also very possible that popularity and intention would never come back to Splitgate in a major way. So rather than fighting an older product with the hopes that it could have another resurgence, it seems like 1047 has decided to start from the ground up and hopefully deliver an amazing product. While this is very exciting news, it's also sad, and many Splitgate players did feel betrayed when this news came out. I mean, for many players, they've been playing for a long time, and while it's cool to know that 1047 is going to deliver another game, it might not play like Splitgate, or it might take a while to come out. And so if you're an avid Splitgate player today, this does kind of leave you high and dry for the foreseeable future. 1047 did go on to Reddit and do an AMA where they answered a bunch of questions, but for the most part it kind of just boils down to we have to wait and see. They did mention the project timeline is still being finalized, but that the earliest we would see this game is 2024, and that they would most likely stay independent again rather than using a publisher. They have a lot of confidence in their own marketing, but I do think this is an interesting decision, as obviously if you go with the publisher, they're going to have probably a lot more push behind marketing, but we'll have to kind of just wait and see what 1047's plan is here. Hopefully they have a bit more of a marketing push behind this product than they did Splitgate, as I really do think Splitgate kind of flourished off of word of mouth and that kind of virality, and I don't know if that's something you should really kind of bank on for a new project, especially if it has a different title. But like I said, that's all speculation. We'll kind of just have to wait and see, because we really don't even have any clue what the next game is going to be. It could be a battle royale, it could be another arena shooter, it could be a class-based shooter, heck, it could be a Destiny clone. We really have no clue. In the meantime though, we did get the final season of Splitgate, and I do want to talk about that. We've also seen continued updates to the playlists in the game and the heavy utilization of user-created content, which I imagine will continue to be the case. Unfortunately though, no new features or upgrades are going to be coming to that map creator to help out that community make even better creation. The final season ended up dropping on September 16th and mostly included a bunch of quality of life updates and a final season pass that is totally free to players, which is pretty nice. In the update, we got the Infinite 100 tier, totally free battle pass, which also brought on the change that premium season challenges are now free. We got gameplay quality of life updates like improved melee damage around portals and bullet size no longer being larger when shooting through a portal. The beta title has been officially removed from the Splitgate name. We got the new simulation map India, and we also got some nice quality of life updates for the user created content community. We now have a download map button option when you're in custom lobbies, and they added the ability to promote a host within a lobby. Map codes are also now 19 digits instead of 16, and they've also improved bot matchmaking on custom maps. They also added that previous no portal playlist that we talked about as a permanent feature in the quick play section. On top of that, just like all the other updates, we also got various bug fixes and optimizations. While this isn't the end of Splitgate per se, since the game will still definitely be playable, at least for the foreseeable future, this does mark the end of any major changes to the game. A game that I have personally hopped in and out of since the original release all the way back in 2019. You can go back, I've made videos on almost every major update of this game. Kind of like a look through the past. Not only can you see Splitgate slowly improve, but you can also see my videos slowly improve, though it also comes with a lot of sadness to go back and look at all those memories and remember all that time playing Splitgate that is now sort of coming to an end. Like many, this game has a special place in my heart, and while I'm excited to see the next project 1047 comes up with, I am definitely sad to see the end of feature development for Splitgate. We do have to be honest though. Splitgate achieved far more than any of us could have possibly imagined. Not only did the initial release get more success and attention than you could have guessed, the console release in 2021 brought Splitgate to levels that nobody could have dreamed of. It truly went viral. Splitgate to me also showed the desire in the gaming community for a good non-battle royale competitive shooter. Sure, the player base didn't stick around forever, but I think we kind of covered maybe why. But I hope Splitgate serves as an inspiration for some other studios or even 1047 themselves to give us more variety in shooters again. It's hard to know what was the final nail in the coffin for Splitgate, but if you listen back through the video and you kind of pay attention to a lot of the dates, I think in many cases it was just that updates came too slow. Sure, when the player base was really small for Splitgate, it didn't really matter if those seasons were really long, but once Splitgate finally got that huge pop off, they still struggled to get out new content on a regular basis, similar to some of the live service games they would have obviously been competing with. You could also argue it's an arena shooter, maybe that genre is kind of fleeting, though we saw the initial interest in this and both Halo Infinite be very high. So to me, I think that shows there's interest for a good arena shooter, but maybe something like Splitgate or Halo Infinite didn't really hit the spot for all the players that were playing. I think there's many alternative realities where Splitgate could have continued to flourish like it was during those first few months after the console release. Unfortunately, that isn't the reality that we live in, and the player base for Splitgate has definitely dwindled. I really hope that 1047 hits this next project out of the park, because Splitgate, while it is pretty iterative of Halo and Portal, was a very unique game in the gaming and FPS landscape where we don't get much creativity or variety. We get sequels to games that already exist and other projects that are honestly pretty safe. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft, alright? Nobody wanted a Tom Clancy Battle Royale. This video was both fun and sad to make. I did really enjoy diving through the past of the game, but it's also sad to go back and live through all the different moments of Splitgate and reminisce on all those memories. I have met some really cool people through Splitgate. I know tons of you guys checked out Splitgate because of some of my coverage on the game, and that's something I'll never really forget. Sure, I was never necessarily a Splitgate YouTuber, but I did feel kind of in touch with that community, and we even ran some pretty cool tournaments, giving away thousands of dollars in prizing, which is something I never would have thought I could have done. I hope this video did a decent job outlining the history of Splitgate, not only the shortcomings of Splitgate, but also some of the successes, the future, speculation, all of that good stuff, because Splitgate is a story worth telling. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. Other than that, follow me over on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all those good places, and I will see you all next time.